30, or I'm sorry, it's 5:30. I think we'll go ahead and get started. I feel like I'm in an elementary grade class where I get specialized. I'm looking for the beanbag chair where I can go and respite at, but I kind of like this right now. But we're doing this because we're going straight into a work session. So I'll call the meeting to order, and we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is right behind Pamela. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Dr. Brennan, do we have any changes to the agenda?
No changes, Dr. Lund.
Can I get a motion and a second to approve the agenda as sent out? Motion by Doug and a second by Cynthia. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Let's move on to item 3, which is the work session. Dr. Brenner.
Thank you, Dr. Lund. If I could just refer you to page 2 of your packet, electronic or paper copy. There's a memo from me, and certainly that memo was really helped crafted by Dr. Lewis, who really provided leadership at our last work session. So I want to thank Dr. Lewis for that. So if we just jump down to the second paragraph, at our November 8th work session, we began to work in the section entitled The Results. And this section serves to clearly identify our budget priorities in alignment with our strategic plan. And I think I'm just going to go off script here a little bit and just note that it's really critical that we get this section right. Because we're done with the first section, we're done with the why, so we won't be amending that or changing that. That is cemented. No more limestone, Dr. Lund, okay? We are cemented there in that left-hand column. So we want to make sure we get the what correct, because that's really going to drive how we do our work moving forward. So you're going to see attached here the guiding change document has been updated to reflect the responses from each of you, each of the work groups from the last meeting. That was shared verbally and also put on the chart paper. And tonight, we will have somebody at each table, probably somebody from Cabinet, will be a recorder using a shared Google Doc, and they'll be in edit mode, so they'll be able to capture everything tonight, so we won't put so much pressure on Cindy to try to make heads or tails out of all of our notes. So we'll be able to do that in real time this evening. So on to the next paragraph. So tonight, we want to finalize the results, as well as move into our unacceptable means section. And as a refresher, the purpose of the results section is to outline exactly where we want to be as a school system and what our priorities are. And oftentimes in this section, districts will elevate a percentage of fund balance that they do not want to dip below. For example, Mr. Berge might say by 2024, we would like our general fund balance not to be lower than 15% of our overall budget. And then if that's the board's desire, I'm just using that as an arbitrary number, then cabinet level administration will make sure that we stay within that budget. And we identify the priorities that will keep us on that trajectory. I'm going to now go to the final paragraph down on the bottom. The second portion of our work tonight is the unacceptable means. This section is crucial to our work. It gives us the best opportunity to clearly outline what we will not do as part of our budget realignment process. And that's really a key sentence that I think we all need to keep in mind as we get to, perhaps in the future, some difficult conversations as we realign our budget with our priorities. I'm now on to the backside. I'm on page 3. So for tonight, we'll spend 45 minutes in the results section. If we move more quickly, we'll certainly be efficient with our time, and then we will move right into the not how. And we'll certainly spend a little more time there to make sure that we're all understanding procedurally how we want to move forward. So when we get to the not how, that will be small group brainstorm, and then there'll be a large group share out like we've done in the past. And then we'll start to refine that, and our goal would be to finish this work this evening before we move into our regularly scheduled board meeting. So again, on behalf of our cabinet level leadership, I want to thank all of you for working through this process. This will be probably one of the most important pieces we have done together as a board and cabinet level administration. And with that, I know when my wife is in the kitchen making lasagna, the last thing she wants is me to start adding more cottage cheese. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lewis to make sure we get the rest of this done correctly. Dr. Lewis.
Thank you, Dr. Brenner. Good evening, everyone. So as we look at the results section, or the what, we're going to ask you to look on with cabinet members, or if you have a device, the cabinet member at your table will share with you the document so you can see it in live time. And I'm going to zip out and grab another device so I can project while still typing with my group here. So the results section here, the what, is what we prepared last time. And just like it looked under current reality, the why, we have a lot here. So ahead of us tonight, we'll be really prioritizing. You'll see here, a lot of it is duplicative. Some of it doesn't fit. And I just want to walk through as you are reviewing this with your team. For example, the results, the what. This is what we want to do. So do we want our special ed students being served in subpar learning environment? So just through that exercise, we've realized that one doesn't fit. So that's just an example of how we're going to be able to narrow here. You will see on your table a two-sided document that has featured here 2 different districts that shares exactly this guide and change document, and it has in here some samples to use as well. So in the next 20 minutes, what your charge as a group is to add anything on here that you don't see reflected in the results or the what. I would ask, though, that before adding, you've really taken the time as a group to look for to make sure there aren't any redundancies. So for example, if we did want to add in that fund balance piece, if you look, I don't know, maybe like 15-ish bullets down, it does talk about fund balance or adequate funded long-term facilities plan that utilizes efficiencies, and then you'll see the next bullet, adequate general fund balance. So to the example that was provided in the memo, if a group chooses to put in there a very precise fund balance percentage, instead of doing a new bullet, I would encourage you to add it to that adequate general fund balance. So that's just an example of how we can work on that. Mr. Berge, excellent job. Just flip it to editing mode. So what's happening now is he's typing right on there, which is excellent. And you will see from your cabinet member that we will add the editing so that we can see exactly what's happening. So we'll pull you back here in 20 minutes. Please make sure that you've gone through together to start eliminating, getting rid of some redundancies, and then going ahead and adding anything further. Cabinet members, just because there's a lot of traffic on the document at one time, I would recommend maybe Catherine's group starting at the top. Scott, you can stay right where you are there in that bottom portion. And then Lindsay, can you start maybe with the appropriate student-staff ratios? And our group will start somewhere in the middle so we're not all competing for the first bullet at the same time on a Google Doc. All right, team, so with that, we will come back together in 20 minutes.
Dr. Lewis, just a quick question.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable with the way we've got board members situated? Because I'll go over to that
That's
group.
perfect.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you. We're going to come back together. That was a few minutes longer than 20 minutes, but I could tell by the robust discussion that we needed those extra moments. We've done a really nice job here of marking this up. We'll do what we did at the last session, where we'll just go through and we'll look for consensus through the very official method of thumbs up or thumbs down. So Dr. Brenner is going to project for all of us here, and then we'll go ahead through that. Okay. And I'll actually start with the very first example that I kind of gave you the answer in my intro. So under the results, the what, we have stricken special education students are being served in a subpar learning environment. Looking for consensus of thumbs up, or I can't agree with that, thumbs down, with striking that through. Yep. Cynthia, you okay with striking that one? Okay.
I was trying to look at this.
No problem.
Oh, it shows striking now.
Yay, good, okay.
Weird. So mine is live now.
That's awesome. Okay. So team, let me just get rid of that one altogether. Okay, next, we have struck through to provide proactive facilities funding through a building reserve fund. My 2 cents on this one, I believe it's picked up later in the document with a bigger degree of specificity. So I believe this one was struck out of duplicative nature here. So thumbs up if you're okay with striking this one. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, the next one, same as the one I just said. I believe it's picked up elsewhere. Are we okay with striking an overall competitive compensation package that needs to be competitive for all employees? Ooh, we're quick here. Nice work. Okay, that one is gone. Upgrade our special ed learning environment throughout the district. Again, I believe this is captured later on, but just looking for consensus on striking that one. Okay, great. Okay, team, I'm going to keep you on your toes, and I'm going to go down to appropriate student-staff ratios based off of comparable regional districts. This has a complete strike-through. It was initially appropriate student-staff ratios, then there was some addition, and now it's struck through. Again, I think this is captured later on in the document. Are folks okay? Yeah.
So our thought process there was, yes, it's captured down below in optimizing staffing levels to student needs, but we also thought then in the what not to do column, we could define levels of ratios if we wanted to. Class size is not over blah, 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 if we were compelled to be specific in that regard.
Perfect. Thank you, Catherine. Can I see some consensus on that one? Mr. Berge, are you sitting out? Thank you. Okay. I'm going to skip here, team, down to sustain a reasonable general fund balance. Again, I think that's more than spelled out below. Are we okay here? Jackie, thank you. Facilities Committee needs to determine additional building funds needed. Strike through on this one. Team, I'm going to skip down here. all the way down to increased staff retention, defined turnover ratio improvement, student outcome achievement, needs specific metrics. This looks like after a lot of wordsmithing, it was deleted altogether. Looking for consensus or not consensus around this one? Okay, great, thank you. Next one, same as what I just said, wordsmith there. Ensure equitable access to a well-rounded, rigorous, engaging, high-quality education in order to improve student outcome and achievement for all students. I think that's picked up differently up above. Looking for consensus on this one being a full strike through. Okay, perfect. Okay, team, now I'm going to take us back up to the top here, but let me just get this a little more space for us here. Now, bullet 1, a sustainable balanced budget with a strong reserve fund. Align budget and long-range financial plan with strategic plan. Looking for a consensus or not on this one?
Those two go together, is that correct?
This is all one bullet here, yep.
Is there a period after fund before a line?
Yes, yep.
Do we need to start that with an action word? Like create a sustainable?
I almost feel like the first part might be easy to do, maybe because it's not picked up later, the reserve fund piece. Line budget, long-range plan, strategic plan could be its own action word to start.
Use your microphone, please. Sorry.
I'm thinking that the first part refers to a reserve fund, which is picked up elsewhere. And then if we start with a line, we're starting with an action word and still encompassing the rest of it.
So Jackie, your proposal is to strike align budget and long-range financial plan with strategic plan?
No,
No,
everything
sorry.
before that.
Strike everything before that. So your proposal would look like this.
Is the reserve fund commented on down below somewhere?
I don't think that was meaning the building reserve fund. I think that's just a reserve fund within the general fund budget, which is what I think that first one's getting to. I don't know if
Oh,
that's
okay.
separate down below or not.
I see.
And I think we have to specify what we mean, because I thought the strong reserve fund was a building fund, but I think it was, and somebody, whoever did this could tell us, does they mean general fund? And then it should say general fund.
Right.
So I think, yeah, it should say with a strong general fund balance.
But if I understood Jackie, she's suggesting that a line is the first bullet, like the first, it comes beforehand.
Okay, so switch the order of the sentences, Jackie.
Yeah, we talked how these really should start with an action word. So that's,
I agree with you, Jackie, that if you scroll down the document, there's another statement about aligning the budget with the strategic priorities. So maybe there's an opportunity to combine those. It's aligned thinking, I think.
There, you're on, way at the bottom. Align resources, second to the bottom of the first page. Not equal manner, I don't remember.
Or are they different things?
I also think we need to look at the second bullet, because I think some of that, what we're trying to say, is picked up in the second bullet.
So the second bullet where we can put in alignment with the strategic, align with strategic priorities in an equitable, not equal manner?
So Catherine, you're proposing establish and sustain a strong building fund to ensure highly effective teaching and learning environments. Take it away from there, please.
In alignment with strategic priorities. In alignment with the strategic priorities. And we really, someplace in there, this is from our group, wanted to have the words equitable, not equal.
And I think you said, Catherine, after priorities in an equitable, not equal.
Not equal manner.
Okay.
If I may, if the word equitable is there, shouldn't that be able to stand on its own? Equitable does, it
Sure.
says equitable, it doesn't say equal, unless,
I agree.
Sure.
Okay, team, let's go to this bullet here, right here, the one that I have highlighted. Establish and sustain a strong building fund to ensure highly effective teaching and learning environments in alignment with strategic priorities in an equitable manner. Looking for consensus around this one.
Would you then eliminate the last bullet then? The align resources?
Okay, so we will keep this change here, and then let me get this out of here for us. Okay, so team, back to the top. I'm back to align budget and long-range financial plan with strategic plan. Given this, are we okay with a strike through on this one since we picked it up in the bullet that Catherine helped to craft? Thumbs up if you are okay with a strike through.
Which one are you trying
Yeah.
to eliminate?
Strike through on align budget and long-range financial plan with strategic plan.
Well, I think the one we just crafted specifically points to a building fund, where the first one is the budget overall. So we do need to find some way to have both of those included, I think.
Okay. Okay, let me get this out of here. Okay, let's leave it then for now on that. Okay. Now, I'm coming all the way down to the purple. Reduce the number of buildings in order to stand up more robust academic and supportive curricular programs. This is striking through based on programmatic efficiency consolidation of facilities. I think we had multiple thoughts there. So team, are we okay with keeping the purple as written?
I'm not. I think that's something we can't say. I mean, we've all talked about how we got too many school buildings, but I'm not sure at this stage we can answer it that way. So I'm not too excited about that bullet.
Okay,
Also don't like to stand up more robust. That, to me, this doesn't mean enough. I mean, reduce the number of buildings. Isn't that the what? We want to reduce the number of buildings? I don't know if we need to give a why.
You know, I guess this one, I don't know that we want to say reduce the number of buildings. There's another one down further that, well, it's right, it's the last one on that first there. Funded long-term facilities plan that utilizes efficiencies. I think that's where the conversation, and that we want to utilize efficiencies, which quote unquote means, in my mind anyway, reduction of facilities.
It doesn't pigeonhole you.
Right.
We wouldn't want to put it in the past tense, funded, right? Don't you want to fund long-term, you want a long-term facilities plan? Well, I don't know. To me, now it's getting a little mushy with the red, the purple, so I'm kind of losing my ability to concentrate on the Google Doc, sorry.
Okay, let me do a little bit of a quick cleanup on this. So the ones in black here, we have already said we are okay with. So let me get those cleaned up for us.
I'm actually fine with the colors. They all look good to me.
Okay, so team, I'm just gonna do some returns here. So we are looking at right here, the purple one, excuse me, that says reduce the number of buildings in order to stand up more robust academic and supportive curricular programs with the strike through of based on programmatic efficiency consolidation of facilities. So I'm hearing that the proposal is actually for us to strike the entire thing.
I mean, doesn't that statement imply that the only way we can get more robust academic and supportive curricular programs is by reducing the number of buildings, which is not true? There are other ways you could get to that, I mean.
I can hear that. I think my thinking was more along the lines of, if we're going to be looking at building numbers, we should specifically state that that's a priority for us, is to review efficiencies somewhere, just so that it's actually stated somewhere that that's something we're looking at. But I can see where there's some overlap with the one that Doug had pointed out.
I'd like to add to that too, that, probably lost in the messaging with the referendum last June, or leading up to last June, was programmatically, we have deficiencies because of the number of buildings that we have. When we start sharing staff and slicing staff the way we've done it, students lose services. I mean, it's as simple as that. So I think if we look programmatically at providing equity between and among all buildings, we would state we need fewer buildings. And if we word it any other way, I think it might get lost. That, well, what did that really mean? If we don't state what the intention is.
So then I would argue, Dr. Brenner, even though you've just said this is in stone, that needs to be under the why. I mean, there needs to be something under the why that reflects that programmatic opportunities are not addressed equally amongst all schools. That's certainly not the way I would phrase it, but I don't think that we've got any kind of programmatic reason under the current reality then.
I think there's a
It
lot.
does-
Oh,
Yeah, it does list facility needs exceed current funding under the Y and excess number of buildings and employees per student. So we do capture that there.
But what I'm saying is, I don't see a capture of a programmatic request for why we're doing this. That's what Dr. Brenner just,
So what we're trying to get, though, is to the what. So
I know, but if we don't have the why, I mean, if what Dr. Brenner just said was true, that what was lost during the referendum was that there were programmatic needs that aren't being addressed, that is the part of the why.
So I think that could be argued that it's under buildings are not optimal for teaching and learning.
Okay. I don't think the general public would get that.
What I think's not captured under the Y is equity, actually. Like, the idea that there's some inequity occurring. I mean, we're saying that facilities may not be optimal for teaching and learning, but we're not really pointing out specifically that there's inequities between schools or between demographics in our Y. But we have a lot of that on the what end.
Let's sit on the purple one for a minute, and let's come back to that. Give us some time to ruminate on that one. Let's go to optimize staffing levels to student needs. That one has made it through all of the cuts here. So I believe that one remains untouched. So looking for consensus if we want to keep that one as written. Optimize staffing levels to student needs. Okay, looks like we're good on that one. Okay, the next one is proposing eliminating a lot of front matter that's just reworded in the back side here. So the language that's being proposed is increase student achievement for all with a deliberate focus on eliminating opportunity gaps based on race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status. How about this table? Okay, thank you.
My sideways comes from, I kind of feel passionate about using student achievement data to drive this. So,
So Jackie, would you propose increase student achievement for all with a deliberate focus on eliminating opportunity gaps based on race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status by using student achievement data? Okay.
Isn't that kind of implied, though? I mean, how else would you know how to do it if we don't? I mean, you could probably say that on all of these, using data and stuff. I mean, I'm fine with including it, but it almost seems like you're just duplicating it from the beginning to the end, so.
I like this one. I'm wondering if it says with a deliberate focus on eliminating opportunity gaps based on race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status. Is that the only way to increase student achievement? Is that the only way to increase student achievement? Because it said that's a deliberate focus. Is that inferring that that's the only way we're going to do it?
So Amber, if you look, it says increase student achievement for all. And then it has with a deliberate focus on eliminating opportunity gaps based on race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status. So it's saying increase student achievement for all while also deliberately focusing on our subgroup data.
Okay.
I like that it just says increase student achievement because I feel like that encompasses all student achievement and not just standardized testing. You know, like the student achievement of their grades or what they're turning in and not just how they did on a particular test on a particular day. So for me, I think it needs to encompass all student achievement, not just a data point.
nice, solid point.
Okay, team, I'm going to ask for a re-consensus on this one. Increase student achievement for all with a deliberate focus on eliminating opportunity gaps based on race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status. And yes, I made up a word there. Okay, we're good on that one. Give me a second to delete this. Okay, and I'll switch that red here and the green to black here in just a moment. Next one. Students receiving special education support are served in an environment that is safe, inclusive, and meets their unique learning and social emotional needs. That's the bullet point here that I'm asking for consensus.
This is special education.
Isn't it though quite similar, I mean, other than specifically being special education, isn't it similar to the one right below it? To provide environments that are suitable for highly effective teaching and learning, and I guess their environments is in there twice, but, I mean, as I look at it, other than highlighting that it's special ed education, isn't it similar to the next one? Which is it all inclusive to everybody?
The first one I think I read as student focused, and the second one is facilities focused. And we sort of had a similar, I think, conversation at our table. And again, kind of how there's, I think, power in uniquely naming racial and socioeconomic gaps. I think there's some special power in specifically stating special education focus because that's such a huge priority for us.
Is it possible to take those two bullets and combine them into one somehow, wordsmith it into one? kind of like we did with the one above it where we said for all, but then we highlighted those areas that we want to focus on. So I'm not suggesting that, I'm asking a question.
So it could be something like eliminating opportunity gaps based on race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and student special education status, or something like that, students served on an IEP.
I'm curious about the safe and inclusive part, specifically being under this one. I know that there's probably some uniqueness in some of the social emotional behaviors, and so I maybe see the safe part. I'm wondering about inclusivity being specific under this one too, because I would imagine that that would be a priority for all students to be in a safe and inclusive environment. So I'm just curious about why those words are specific to this bullet point.
I don't know why, but here's the example. If I think about the tour where they were using, I think it was at Lewis and Clark, there was a building or a room at the back that had like storage and they were changing them in there. Probably not inclusive necessarily to be in a closet, but I don't know.
But would that fit under the equitable resources bullet? Or do we extend, I think that bullet is higher up, but do we move safe and inclusive as an add-on to the equitable portion?
I would suggest that part of this is for programs that we presently don't have. There are students who need to be served outside of our campus that All True doesn't even have opportunities for our students. So I think that's where a piece of this comes from. A second piece of this probably comes from the Schrader environment for medically fragile students. So that's where my head's at when I see this.
I'm wondering back to, I think it was Jeff and Doug, or Doug and somebody, about, do we need two separate bullets, one to highlight special education and then one for all, or do you combine those into one bullet somehow?
I agree with what Jackie commented. I think there are certain elements that we're trying to call specific attention to. And I think even when you think about our push for the levy, we were very specific about identifying the gaps in our facilities as it pertains to our special education services. So I like keeping it separate.
If we don't have it separate, well, I see it as also connecting to us specifically calling out ADA compliance and the why as well. But it does get mushy because there's so many of these things where we provide that to all students as a given, so, but obviously, we're not with this one, so I don't know.
I will also say that our student achievement data for special education is the lowest group that we see, 9% achievement at proficient or advanced in math, and 11% at English language arts at proficient and advanced. So to me, I think there's power in calling out special education.
And I do like that it's support and not IEP, because that encompasses 504 plans, some alternative services as well.
Does special ed also include gifted and talented students, or no?
No. So special education is really students served on an IEP. Jackie, if you wanted it to say 504s, we would need to call that out. Yeah.
And gifted and talented is couched under special education and century code, but that's not what this is speaking to.
Well, that's what I was asking, because if it was referenced in our district, my perspective would be that individuals might think of it as those who are maybe not meeting standards versus academically those on the other end. So I just wanted to delineate if that was included or not. I'm fine with how this one's written. I think it's, especially given the academic data piece of this, I just wanted to ask a question about the safe and inclusive part, if that needed to be more broad.
One more comment on that, Amber. We do have the potential and need to look at more inclusivity around co-teaching in the general ed environment. So that's also a piece for students served on an IEP, more of that push in co-teaching with the general ed teacher too.
Would it make sense to say least restrictive environment versus inclusive, or maybe not, never mind, I'm getting too much into it, because, yeah, if we're ADA compliant, or I mean, if we're compliant with what we're supposed to be doing, that's happening anyway.
I'm going to call for consensus on this. Students receiving special ed support are served in an environment that is safe, inclusive, and meets their unique learning and social emotional needs. Okay, I'm going to call this one finished. Okay. The next one is just to provide. And then we have fiscally stable school district / through, looking for consensus to delete the entire line, to provide fiscally stable school district. Okay, done.
Can I ask just a broad question?
Yeah.
These ones that we're going on, is this stuff written in granite tonight? Or are we going to be able to look at a clean version and some time for reflection to get back?
So maybe, Dr. Brenner, did you hear that question? The question was, are these written in granite tonight, or can we come back? Is it okay if I propose something? Okay, so what I propose is let's try to get these in, what's softer than granite? Limestone. Let's get these in limestone tonight and then granite them up at one more quick work session in the very near future so that we can have it done so that we can start building budget proposals. Dr. Brenner, does that work as an approach?
I mean, my point is that after we have a chance to reflect on some of this, we might have a brainstorm or something like that. That's my only suggestion.
I think that's a fair point, yeah. Dr. Brenner, sorry, are you okay with that approach? Okay, perfect. All right. Team, I'm deleting to provide fiscally stable school district. Okay. Then looking for consensus around deleting, all students will have equitable access and opportunity to program offerings. Good. Okay, thank you for that consensus. Next one, I'm looking for consensus around deleting, provide adequate and respectful learning environments, resources at all. Okay, great. I feel like this one was picked up above, but am I making that up? Align resources with strategic priorities in an equitable, not equal manner. Or are we back? Okay. So team, I'm actually looking for consensus to delete this one, align resources. Okay, done. Okay. I'm going to split these apart. Looking for consensus to keep New North Side Middle School.
Would you repeat that, please?
Yes, looking for consensus of keeping New North Side Middle School.
I think we need to put an action verb in front of it, however. And Lindsay, do you want my computer?
So build A. Okay, build A. Okay, good. That one's set in limestone. Team, I'm looking for consensus to delete defined capital projects from the long-term facilities plan. Yep. Looking for consensus to delete define capital projects from the long-term facilities plan. Remember, this is where we want to be the what, the results. It's,
That's so clear.
okay, Scott's table. Okay, Amber, are you good? Okay, all right, that one's gone. Okay. Sorry, I just gotta bump this one down. Okay. Funded long-term facilities plan that utilizes efficiencies.
You're deleting, right?
I'm asking, this one is labeled in black with no changes. Are we good to keep that one?
I don't understand.
So
Funded long-term, I need help with this. What's
Okay.
the adjective or the verb?
Okay, so I'll switch it to fund long-term facilities plan that utilizes efficiencies.
And what are we referring to when it utilizes efficiencies? Are you talking about,
Maybe here's where we can put that programmatic piece in there, or some et cetera for verbiage.
talking about the right lighting, the right windows, right? That's what this is referring to because it's facilities?
I think what this is referring to is potential consolidation and closing of schools.
We're talking programming, staffing, resource
But you
efficiency.
could also interpret it as putting energy-efficient windows and energy-efficient lighting in it just as well, because it looks like that. So if you want something specific, you got to say it. If you leave it generalized like this, that could be interpreted different ways. And I'm wondering, is this not covered on any of the ones above it? I don't know. I'm asking, again, a question.
I would argue it's listed under established and sustained a strong building fund to ensure highly effective teaching and learning environments at all. The second bullet.
I disagree with that because the building fund is just one piece of our facilities and funding our facilities. And if we just say we're going to use a building fund, then we can forget about doing much for buildings over the next 30 years. But
So would
that's
it,
why the whole plan is going to be much bigger than a building fund. So to me, they're separate. I mean, now, I wouldn't have the building fund up in the top one, but since it's up there, this is just more broad, more encompassing than that first one is.
Dr. Lewis, why don't we take the fund long-term facilities plan that utilizes program efficiencies? Maybe that's the missing piece there.
okay. Call the consensus on that one. Fund long-term facilities plan that utilizes program efficiencies. Lindsay? Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. Okay, this next one is adequate general fund balance. 10% by June 30th of 2024, then 15% by June 30th of 2026. This one was expanded to include the precise numbers.
Now, Scott didn't specifically put in 2024. Does he mean 2024 or 3024?
So you're the reason I said it that way, because you got confused when I read it the first time. Team, looking for consensus on this one.
Do we need an action word in front of adequate, like establish? Establish adequate general fund
Okay.
balance.
Adding that adjustment. Okay. Now.
Can you go up higher
Establish.
About a balanced budget, or, I mean, I think it should be part of one that talk about balancing the budget and building the general fund. I don't have problems with those dates and the levels, but, I mean, I'd probably get there a little faster, but I just think we should talk about ending it with a balanced general fund budget in here someplace. Because originally there was, it was a sustainable, balanced budget with a strong reserve fund, which we had some disagreement over what reserve fund was. But that seems like that's disappeared, and I don't remember it disappearing.
I think you're right. We need to have something about general budget, year to year, balancing that budget, separate from building funds, separate from this line that we're talking about now. They're different things.
So, I mean, I think that I think we need one in here that's, a sustainable, balanced budget with an, whatever the term is, adequate general fund balance of 10% by, 15% by.
I'm sorry, can you propose that wording again? Do you want it right there in the establish adequate general fund balance bullet?
So it would, where is it? So establish a sustainable, balanced budget with an adequate general fund balance of 10% by June, which we already got up there.
I butchered that a little bit. Okay, I've got so far, establish a sustainable balanced budget with a,
Just get rid of sustainable there, just adequate general fund balance.
okay. Okay. Okay, did that capture what you wanted, what you were saying?
Yes, that's
Okay,
what I was saying.
so team, let's look for consensus on this.
So I'm going to make, is this Dr. Brenner's initial one?
No, I just added establish.
So I think that this should say achieve a sustainable balanced budget.
Okay,
Because you could say, let's establish a committee, and the committee does nothing. Whereas you're going to achieve something that's going to happen.
okay, looking for consensus. Oh, you guys are ahead of me here. Okay, looks like we're good on that one. Catherine, do you mind coming behind me and switching that to black, as long as you're up there? Thank you. Okay, team, we're down to ensure that student achievement results drive the design and influence allocation of resources in the budget. This is specifically naming our high reliability schools framework. Looking for consensus around this one.
Could I offer one thing?
Okay?
Remove the word that. An English teacher taught me you don't need to use that as much as you do. Accountants use that a lot. Right. Ensure student achievement.
Okay?
I have become that doctor, the police.
Okay, one more consensus round, please, on that one. Okay, so I believe that we are back to just our friend in purple. It's, Catherine, do you mind scrolling up to reduce the number of buildings? Thank you, I know you're resolving all the comments there. Okay, reduce the number of buildings in order to stand up more robust academic and supportive curricular programs. Let's take this second part. Can we get consensus on deleting based on programmatic efficiency consolidation of facilities? Can we do consensus on deleting that part? Okay, so we're going to get rid of that back part. Okay, now what we're looking at is reduce the number of buildings in order to stand up more robust academic and supportive curricular programs.
About offer, in order to offer more robust academic and supportive curricular programs?
To offer.
I don't know,
Okay.
I'm not sure. Dr. Lund had a comment about this one earlier.
Okay, I don't know if you want to word it, but can you say, look at reducing the number instead of just saying reducing, so then you're not held to reducing if you choose not to? Or can you not start with look at, because that's not, like,
Here-
concrete enough?
Here's why I don't necessarily like this one. So for example, what does reduction amount look like? What number is that? But then I believe it to be contradictory if we're saying that we want to reduce the number of buildings, but on the same column, we have build a new north side school. So does that mean we build it and then reduce it? We're not, there's no reduction there, we're just replacing. Then someone could argue, well, we're adding a CTE center, that's not a reduction, we're adding. So I think that there would be other areas where we're discussing efficiencies in terms of programmatic usage, but
If everybody would agree that the third to the last bullet, fund long-term facilities plan that utilizes program efficiencies, if everybody would agree that that means examining the number of buildings that we have, then I'd be fine letting go of the reduction one.
I agree.
Should we add program and building efficiencies to get back to what Dr. Lund was saying, to call direct attention to it? Programming and building efficiencies, or no?
So are you saying utilizes building program efficiencies?
Yeah, or utilizes facilities and program efficiencies, something of that nature, is that, or you can specifically, I'm sorry, I don't have a microphone, to draw specific attention to buildings?
That's redundant, because you've got fund long-term facilities plan. So I don't think you need the word facilities again.
Maybe that utilizes program and building efficiency data, or something along those lines. Something that indicates that we reviewed what our program efficiencies are and where our building efficiencies are.
But I don't think it's just our end result isn't to utilize the data, it's to fund it to result in efficiencies.
I believe it reads fine. Facilities are facilities. Program efficiencies are the programs that are there. I think it reads fine and works just the way it is.
Okay, so call the consensus on reduce the number of buildings in order to offer more robust academic and supportive curricular programs while relying on the fund long-term facilities plan that utilizes program efficiencies.
Gonna zap the first one.
I don't think we're deleting fund long-term facilities plan that utilizes. Yeah, so reducing the number of buildings in order to offer more robust academic and supportive curricular programs would be deleted, but we would keep fund long-term facilities plan that utilizes program efficiencies. Okay. All right, team.
Can I,
Yeah.
going back to Amber's comment about the North Side Middle School, should we change that to build a new North Side Middle School to replace Valley Middle School? I mean, is there any reason in calling out Valley Middle School? I mean, we all know it. And that way then, we're not adding buildings, we're replacing a building. I mean, would it be better to say that?
Okay, so the suggestion is delete, build a new North Side Middle School and replace it with replace Valley Middle School.
Specific in what we need.
Would, just as a caveat to that. Would someone ever think that a replacement of that middle school would be placed in Midtown or Southtown? Do we specifically need to call out that it will remain on the north side?
I think it'd be advisable to do that, because there will be somebody that tries to campaign against it.
Replace Valley Middle School on its current site.
There you go. And not on University Park.
Okay, so consensus around replace Valley Middle School on its current site.
That looks good.
Okay. So we have limestone, right? Is that the right stone? Okay. Okay, well, I'm so excited. I've never been so excited about limestone. All right, team. Catherine and I are going to quickly clean up the results here. And I'd like our teams to take 15 minutes to type right in the document, cabinet members, of the unacceptable means, the not how. And I would encourage you just to do a quick review of seeing what the other districts have placed. Not that you have to copy theirs, but just helps us to really ground in what it is this section is. So how are we going to ensure the results section, but by not doing these things? So not violating laws, regulations, and contracts, not going below the 15% fund balance policy. So just take a moment to review those, and then take 15 minutes to start plugging in at each group the unacceptable means. at how unacceptable means, but it was brought to my attention that we didn't quite have consensus on the third bullet under the what. So I would like us to get consensus there. It's highlighted in yellow. Provide an overall competitive compensation and benefits package for all staff to attract and retain highly qualified staff. I think there was a proposal for slightly different wording here.
And what I was thinking there was providing compensation and benefits are a method to attract and retain. So I was, I guess, maybe thinking of just getting rid of that compensation and benefits altogether and just say to attract and retain highly qualified staff.
Okay.
In today's society, that compensation and benefits package is what's going to attract your highly qualified teachers. Unfortunately, that is what they're gonna look at this point. That's why we're losing teachers.
But there's so many other things. I mean, you could have the best compensation and benefits, and you could have me as a principal, and nobody would be in that school.
I would say that's true, but I would say the compensation and benefits is the first thing people look at, and we have people not even applying in the district when they look at compensation.
So would it provide overall competitive compensation and benefits packages to attract and retain highly qualified staff? Is that
Because staff encompasses.
to provide
all staff,
overall
not just teachers.
competitive compensation and benefit packages to attract and retain highly
Or
qualified
could you say
staff?
as a
Or as a
method?
method? Yep, as a method to attract and retain.
I also just want to point out, I know if this violates the norms of this thing, just tell me to shut up, but under the Y where it says unable to attract and retain adequate staff, I typically don't like absolutes. And to me, that feels very absolute. Like, have we not hired anyone, or has anyone not applied at all? And so, like, is there a word that would maybe just be placed in front of that? Like, that may be the case in some, but have we not had anybody apply for any jobs,
I
basically?
believe we do have jobs that we don't have people applying for, though, don't we?
But that's
Or we don't,
some, not all.
we don't have qualified people applying for some of our jobs.
Correct.
Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, but I do think it is very true, though. Like, we're not having people apply for some of the
My
jobs.
point is there's some, not all. So unable to me feels very absolute, like it's all versus some or most or. So sorry if that goes backwards.
Maybe it's
but-
difficult to attract and retain adequate staff.
Team, I am going to ask us to focus on the bullet that we're on, of provide an overall. Amber, I'm not ignoring you, I'm just putting you in the waiting area, if this was a Zoom. So,
I actually like the highlighted area the way it was before. I mean, if you look at any business in the world, the first thing people look at, maybe what part of the country or the world they're moving to, but they look at their compensation and their benefits package. And then, as they're going through the recruiting process, they may look at who are they going to be working with and stuff like that. So I like it the way it was originally written myself.
I also think benefits sometimes encompasses a lot more than what we think technically in black and white contract form, but also like, oh, there's a benefit in that we live in this kind of community, or that we have this many teachers that you'll be co-teaching with, or, you know, those types of things, so.
okay, so there's a question to go back to the very original language here. So given this conversation, I'm going to ask folks to come back to consensus on provide an overall competitive compensation and benefits package for all staff to attract and retain highly qualified staff.
Do we need that for all staff in there?
Yeah, we could cut out those 3 words.
Did I backspace one too many times there? Sorry.
I think it's important to include all staff because we're not necessarily
Right.
talking about teachers.
Right, no, but if we take, I mean, because it's kind of duplicating staff in there. So if it just says provide an
Oh, I see,
overall
okay.
competitive compensation benefits package to attract and retain highly qualified staff.
Okay, thank you. Misunderstood you.
Okay. Going to call for consensus. Provide an overall competitive compensation and benefits package to attract and retain highly qualified staff. Mr. Manley, I'm going to call that a consensus vote, my friend. Okay. We love unanimous. We'll take consensus, especially on a halfway consensus there. All right, but thanks for raising that. All right, team. So President Lund said we can have until 7:30. So now, cabinet members, please, please, please switch on editing mode. And team, let's work for 7 minutes to start editing, just as we did tonight on the results section. Let's start editing unacceptable means, the not how. And to President Lund's point, both the results, the what, and the unacceptable means, the not how, are in limestone. Maybe unacceptable means is in gravel, not sure. But we'll come back to both and get those into Granite at a follow-up study session. So go ahead, use edit mode, and start to redline through, tweak, etc. under unacceptable means, the not how, as small groups. We'll get that date and time set forth to all of us. We are going to go through and just triple check that we are all on the same page, all on consensus still around the results, the what, as well as then flesh out our unacceptable means, the not how. So hopefully by the end of our next study session, we will have a completed guiding change document. So thank you so much for your time and attention tonight. Every bit of this work is so crucial. So I'll turn it back to President Lund.
One question, did you guys like this format of doing this stuff, the work session before our exciting business new stuff? So maybe we can plan for doing it the same order next time. We are going to take a 6-minute, 36-second break to get our room realigned, and if it's not quite ready, it'll take longer. 37 seconds, so we will go ahead and get started. Let's move on to item 4, which is approval of the minutes. They're November 22nd minutes on electronic pages 5 through 7. Do I have any additions, corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second? Motion by Doug and a second by Jeff. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Under 5, we don't have anybody that I know of that wanted to speak in the crowd or online. So we will move on to item 6, which is superintendent's recommendations for discussion. 7A is review of the meeting norms on electronic page 8. Mr. Douthit.
Okay, the norms are to be prepared, be on time, value and respect each other, exercise thoughtful deliberation and conversation, be professional at the board table and when visiting with the general public, speak up when the norms are not being followed, and advocate on behalf of students and keep the community in mind.
Thank you so much. Let's move on to item 6B, which is board educational PLCs. We have Amy Bartos, our Chief Academic Officer, here today. Thank you, Amy.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board. Thank you for having me back. I'm excited to talk about professional learning communities tonight. We have 2 goals. The first is we want to make sure that we have a collective understanding of professional learning communities. I fully recognize that for some of you, this will be an affirmation of what you already know, and for some of you, it may be new information. The second goal is to understand the work that's being done during early release time. And as we talk tonight, please feel to stop me at any point, ask questions, clarifications, happy to have a conversation. Okay, the other thing is I do have 2 short video clips, so I'm not sure if it's too hard to turn, but up to you. Okay? All right, so the why of PLCs and why tonight at the board table. So as we look at professional learning communities or PLCs, what's really important to understand is the work that you do here, as you know, directly affects the work that happens to improve student achievement and success. When you look at some of your work, aligning policies with learning missions of the district, the strategic plan, modeling research-based and data-driven decisions, they all set the district up for success. They dictate our path forward. So when we look at this, it's important that we all have an understanding of professional learning communities and their fundamental purpose. So first of all, what is a PLC? A professional learning community is composed of collaborative teams whose members work interdependently, and I'll highlight interdependently to be meaning that we need each other. We have to do this work together. When we look at what they're doing, they're working to achieve common goals, those goals that are set. There's no more silos. We're working together to achieve success for all students, and we're all accountable from the board table all the way through the schoolhouse. We are all mutually accountable for those goals. I'm going to have you listen to a short 4-minute video from Dr. Becky Dufour. She's just going to talk about the important facets of a professional learning community, including the 4 critical questions.
Now, the first and the biggest of the big is simply this. We do embrace learning as our fundamental purpose, learning for all. And because learning is our purpose, as educators, we're willing to examine every single practice, policy, program, procedure, everything we've traditionally done, looking at those practices and policies through the lens of how does this impact learning? Are we engaging in behaviors educators in our classrooms across the building that promote student learning? They're learning at higher levels because we do this? Or are we actually engaging in some practices that are preventing students from learning at high levels? So we have to embrace learning as our purpose and be willing to examine and change some of our traditional practices that are misaligned with learning. One of our really good friends, he was named the Superintendent of the Year in 2011, National Superintendent Mark Johnson, puts it this way. He says, teaching without learning isn't teaching, it's just presenting. So now we have to make a switch away from our traditional focus as educators has been teaching. Now we have to say, but are they learning, and how do we know? Learning is our purpose. Doug Reeves says that leaders at all levels, classroom leaders all the way up to school board, we have to begin to look at everything we do through the lens of learning. Now, if we meant it when we said learning is our purpose, and we're willing to examine and change some of our practices, the conversations that we're going to be having in our schools and across our districts are going to be wrapped around the 4 critical questions of learning, not teaching, but learning. And they're these. If we want every child to learn at high levels, then those of us who serve those children have to be crystal clear on the answer to learn what? What are the most essential skills and concepts and dispositions, character traits, work ethic, 21st century skills that we know our students must acquire in order to be successful this year and as we send them on to the next level? So what is it that we want our students to learn? We have to get clear on that across our team and then have a scope and sequence within our schools and school districts. So we don't leave it up to every teacher to decide, what will I teach, when will I teach it, how much time will I spend teaching it? But teams come together and they clarify exactly what must our students learn. What should they know and be able to do? That question, all of these questions apply to every educator. Doesn't matter what level, pre-K, all the way up through higher ed, we would contend. And it doesn't matter what content you teach. Art, music, PE, technical course, language arts, math, doesn't matter. These questions are what educators embrace that drive our focus on learning. The second question, once we've decided what we want our students to know and be able to do, how will we know if they're actually learning that? We have to have systems to monitor each student's learning on a timely basis. And no matter how well we teach it the first time, would you agree? Almost every time we teach a new lesson or a new unit, won't there always be some students who don't learn it the first time? Absolutely. So then the next question just naturally evolves. What will we do in response to those students who didn't learn it the first time? What will we do to give those students extra time and extra support as a team and as a school system so that they can learn those things that are most essential? And what about the kids that did learn it, or they already knew it before we taught it? What are we doing to extend and enrich and deepen the learning for every single student entrusted to us? These are the questions that drive the work of educators who are committed to that mission of learning for all and to the PLC process.
Three that we can kind of keep in our brain. First is one fundamental purpose. This is the why. Why we come to work every day, why you are part of a school board, because we work to ensure high levels of learning for all students, each, every, all. And this is what PLC is doing, is working to provide a system or a structure in which teachers can collaborate in order to do this. Then there are 2 core beliefs. So in Grand Forks Public Schools, we can say that we believe all children can learn at high levels. We also believe that all children will learn because of what we do. So when we think about those instructional strategies that we implement in classrooms, that is what we're talking about here. That, if you will, Marzano's first or the 5th PLC question. PLC also has 3 big ideas: focus on learning, collaborative culture, and focus on results. So when we look at the 4+2 questions, this is what it's all about. It's about collaborative teams focusing on learning through that collaborative culture, and we're focused on results, mutually accountable. You may be wondering, how does this acronym, PLC, go with our other big acronym, HRS, High Reliability Schools? When we look at high reliability schools, we'll listen to Dr. Warwick talk a little bit how PLC and HRS go together.
High reliability schools and professional learning communities at work are a hand-in-glove piece. They are a confluence of two of the greatest initiatives. They take the work of Rick and Becky DeFore and Bob Eaker and all of the Solution Tree team, and the work of Bob Marzano and all of us and our Marzano Research Associates, and the research and the experience, and they begin to bring them together so that they become just a reciprocal ability to really keep you focused on the right work. In fact, here's the key. If you're an HRS school, you're going to start with the cornerstone being get the professional learning community in place. If you're a professional learning community school, HRS offers you some other things to even think about that will enhance your ability for PLCs to affect and really move your kids. So when I talk about one, I'm talking about the other. It's a reciprocal concept. And used side by side, I truly believe this can become the single most effective driving force for student achievement. Additionally, I think there's a power that we have to recognize. This approach of leadership is appropriate for turnaround schools. It's also appropriate for those schools that are already successful, but want to ensure that you have a high reliability to replicate your success. You're not just going to rely on the luck of the dealer. You want to know why learning is occurring in your school, and you want to be able to make sure you maintain those systems. I think this is really critical. This form of leadership is also key because it focuses heavily on systems of operations and less on the individual characteristics of the school principal. It's really more about our systems healthy and how do we maintain them so that when we switch principals, which happens, we can continue our stride, which then brings us to this kind of, I think, one of the most important aspects of this model. It also allows us as a district, as a school, to reduce the amount of backsliding and starting over that happens too often when we get a new principal. And you know, guys, in our business, we have fallen victim to that time and time again. And it usually looks and sounds like this. We get a good initiative in place. We're starting to learn about it. The principal, for whatever reason, goes on. Things are going pretty well. New principal comes in, completely new ideas. Hey, we're going to do it this way now. You can hear the air come out of the balloon. It starts to steal our energy a little bit. The high reliability concept begins to mitigate that factor.
Around PLC, we needed to build understanding and support for all stakeholders within Grand Forks Public Schools. So when we look at question number 1, what do we want students to learn or know how to do? It's all about identifying priority standards and proficiency scales. When we look at question 2, and how do we know that they know that? It's all about common assessment. And then when we look at questions 3 and 4, we're talking about those learning units that include interventions and extension. So if students already have that capability or that learning, or they need some additional support, those systems are in place. So within Grand Forks, what we've been focusing on for the last couple of years is to look at how we can support teachers in this process, administrators as well. We've worked as a CIT team to collect resources that support the PLC process, that are organized and easily accessible. We've looked at we have produced step-by-step documents that include links and supports and how to accomplish the PLC process, how to work through some of those first steps, defining norms, defining your team, identifying priority standards. We've also used grant dollars to contract with resources such as Scott Carr. He's a Solution Tree Associate at the middle level that came in this past June and did a reboot for our PLC leaders and administrators. Also hosted a planning day of how do we plan and prepare for this upcoming year. Along with understanding and support is we understand that it's great to use grant dollars to contract with someone as fabulous as Scott Carr, but we also need the day-to-day supports. So we've taken the time to identify teacher leaders at every content or grade level area, align it with an administrator and instructional design coach. So when you're not quite sure to go, or you need affirmation that you're on the right track, or you just need someone to help problem solve, our system is there to support our colleagues. We've also worked to see how we can be more transparent in some of our processes, make sure that documents are easily accessible. So at the secondary level, we've created a curriculum warehouse where we have created a section for each department, and then within each department is each course that we offer. Within this warehouse, what you'll find are spots for priority standards, our scales, common assessments, units, PLC notes, and documents. What's really great about this is it's easily accessible to everyone. So if you're in a role as an EL teacher, a special educator, an interventionist, and you need access to what the priority standards or scales are for a course, they're here for you. You don't have to try to track them down. They're also living, breathing documents. So as we continue to look at student achievement data, these are editable so we can go back and make the changes that we need to support student learning. The other thing that teacher teams, our instructional design coaches, and our curriculum coordinators have been hard at work at is designing proficiency scales, both for students, teachers, and then also for teachers that have identified curricular resources to support these priority standards. The other thing that teachers have been doing is once they've identified priority standards, and then proficiency scales are created, they're aligning those to the required instructional resources that we use within our district. So for example, if I were a kindergarten teacher, I could see that the standard readings, literature fiction for K2 is taught in the units that go above, so Unit 1, Week 1 and 3. This work is also being done at the secondary level. This is an 8th grade math example. One thing that is super important to understand is that the PLC process never ends. It's cyclical. No matter where you are in the process, you are responding to student need. So as you have a new cohort of students, you are continuing that cycle of assessing, teaching, learning, assessing over and over. It's also really important to note that instructional practices that we use are an important part of the collaborative process of a professional learning community. It's also the first step to getting towards guaranteed and viable. Any questions for me tonight? Happy to have conversation or questions, answer wonderings. Jackie?
So PLCs, I generally think of, okay, all of the 5th grade students might get together and do some of this work. How often do, like, 5th graders from one school get to talk with 5th grade teachers at another school? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So at the elementary level, you're right, it's a little different. So what we have is we have professional learning communities that are generally school-based, but then several times throughout the course of the year, we have grade level meetings where teachers come together. Right now, I would say they're more learning directed, going over new assessments or curricular resources, but the hope is that that turns into a PLC once we get there. Where it's different at the secondary level, when you have 7 biology teachers, they can get together on a regular basis. Great question.
Other questions for Amy? Go ahead, Amber.
So along with Jackie's question, what happens then if there is only like a 1 or 2 section class, especially at the elementary level?
So typically, if we have a smaller school where there's only one section of first grade, typically there would be vertical PLCs. Generally speaking, they go primary, intermediate, so you might have a K1, 2 teacher collaborating, 3, 4, 5 collaborating. But most of our schools right now have at least 2 sections.
Other questions for Amy? Seeing none, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Let's move on to superintendent's recommendations for actions. 7A consent agenda, which is on electronic pages 31 through 33. Can I get a motion and a second?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Dr. Schaap. Do we get a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Douthit. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Let's move on to item B, which is approval of curriculum proposal on electronic pages 34 through 36. Ms. Galach.
Yes, so this is you had a preview of this information at the last school board meeting. So this is a recommendation to approve the following additions to the high school handbook. You can see the committee members that made up the review board for the proposals that are outlined in the packet. And the suggestion is that the school board approves adding introduction to personal finance, advanced personal finance, 3D sculpture and form, and dual credit introduction to American Indian Studies for the ensuing school year.
Thank you. Clarifying questions or comments from board members? If not, the recommendation is for these approvals, as Catherine stated. Do we have a motion?
A motion.
We have a motion by Jackie and a second by Mr. Douthit. Any further questions? Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Let's move on to item 7C, which is approval of Career Impact Academy construction delivery method on pages 37 through 44. And unfortunately, Mr. Arnold is not here, so we're going to have to deal with Scott. Scott, thank you for pinch hitting here.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I'll try to fill in the best I can. And to the extent I can't, as I walk through this at the end, in the audience, Tom Beam, Director of Construction Services from JLG, is here, and he will certainly be able to answer any questions that I can't. The memorandum starts on page 37 of the electronic packet. Century Code 48, the 012-18, basically gets into the Grand Forks Public Schools governing body shall consider how to proceed on construction delivery method, in this case for the proposed Career Impact Academy. North Dakota Century Code requires the governing body to consider 3 areas when considering utilizing either a design bid build process, construction manager, or a construction manager at risk, which is labeled as CMAR delivery method. These determinations are that it's in the best interest of the public to utilize the agency construction manager or construction manager at risk public improvement delivery method, that the agency construction manager or construction manager at risk planning and design phase services will not duplicate services normally provided by an architect or an engineer, and C, that the agency construction manager or construction manager at risk construction services will be in addition to and not duplicate the services provided for in the architect and engineer contracts. In consultation with the architect of record, JLG, for the Career Impact Academy, there are several things to consider in this process. The size of the project, in this case expected to exceed $20 million. There's a large amount of risk due to the complexity of new construction, the extreme volatility in the construction market. There's an opportunity to receive in-kind donations during the construction process with the CMAR. And it is the administrative recommendation that the district consider the CMAR delivery method. Again, several advantages for the selection of the CMAR delivery method. Reduction in district exposure in the construction process to provide resources and ensure quality and a timely project. Provides an open bid process, allows for the selection of the best contractor versus the lowest price, which is a requirement of in the design bid, that process. And provide district with a single point of contact on the project. And again, easily allows for in-kind donations. The subsequent pages, several pages, are the request for qualifications. And, this would be, the process that would be advertised, and individuals or firms that would want to respond to this request for qualifications would respond to. There's a variety of details, including on page 39, the commencement and completion date of the project. Assuming approval, obviously, of course, this assumes the approval of the grant application with the state of North Dakota for the $10 million match. We had thought the approval would have been anticipated by December 31st. However, there was an extension in time for applications to be submitted, so that will get delayed a little bit. Upon selection of the CMAR, work would begin really immediately with the school district and JLG architects. The process through the advertising and selection committee, et cetera, would take until February 21st. And then the construction schedule, follows with, bid packages by January of 2023, construction commencement by April of 2023, substantial completion by July of 2024. And so the scope of CMAR services under letter E, if you go to the next page, again, walking through estimating services through the design phases, construction feasibility recommendations, construction project, or complete project construction delivery. Again, we're looking at roughly a $20 million project, including all the equipment, furnishings, technology, contingencies, and other related expenses, and procurement and supervision of all subcontractors. The deadline for a response to the RFQ would be January 12th. The subsequent pages again go through more of the timeframes, which again, RFQ advertisement beginning this Wednesday if upon board approval, and with selection of CMAR by February 14th, and work beginning with JLG by February 21st, or upon approval by the state of the $10 million grant. In addition to that, I'll refer you to page 44 for an additional memorandum on the selection committee process. And there's specific North Dakota Century Code guidelines under Chapter 48, once again, for the selection process for construction manager at risk planning and design phase services. North Dakota Century Code specifically spells out who will be represented on this committee. And the agency selection committee shall consist of the following positions: an administrative individual from the governing body, which in this case we would recommend Mr. Chris Arnold as Director of Building and Grounds, a registered architect, a registered engineer, and a licensed contractor. So each of those is required under North Dakota Century Code. With the assistance of JLG, again, the architect of record, Mr. Arnold has identified, the architect, registered architect, engineer, and licensed contractor. All selection process work will be submitted to the governing body, the Grand Forks Public School Board, for final approval. So that's, I guess, a lengthy conversation by me regarding the process for, or the recommendation for selection of a CMAR, and then the process we would go through to advertise that, as well as the committee that would be established to provide recommendations for the board for the ultimate selection of the construction manager at risk.
Thank you, Mr. Berge. On page 40, it says the application deadline is January 12th, 2021. I'm assuming you mean 2022, because 21 was 10 months ago, so that must just be a typo.
Yep, that
Okay.
would be correct.
Okay.
I will write that down and refer that to Mr. Arnold.
Any questions, clarifying questions? Go ahead, Cynthia.
So my understanding is, and Scott, you'll know, the date for the new submission of the grant is, hasn't it been extended for how long?
To December 31st.
With that, are you sure you want to have the ad going out on December 15th through January 5th?
With the very good question. With the time frame, even with, looking at advertising it already on this Wednesday, the ultimate with the committee that needs to be established and the time frame for submission of by the applicants, and then actually ultimate approval at the board would not be until February 14th, even with this time frame. So we're hopeful that the state would be relatively swift in the approval, and of course throughout the process with the if there'd be a situation where we did not know effective by mid-February or February 21st is the time frame mentioned in here, we would certainly hold off and wait on some of that work until such point as we do have approval. But we would like to move through the process as really it's about a 2-month process to for the ad to be placed, time for the companies to submit their applications, and for the committee of those various individuals to review and interview those applicants. We're looking at a 2-month time frame.
I just worry for I worry for the company who's putting a lot of effort, and then if it wouldn't get to be funded, and I think about the saying, don't count your chickens before they hatch. That's what I was thinking when I asked the question.
Yeah, and so this is for the for the proposal process, and so the work by that CMAR would not begin really until such point as as we did have verification upon approval of the grant.
I think CMARs are pretty common nowadays. I dealt with them at Altru a lot, so I think the people have their standard stuff already written up. So go ahead, Doug.
I guess just a question, are we going to need 3 different motions for this? One to decide that we want to do the CMAR delivery method, one to approve the request for qualifications, and the third one to approve the selection committee?
No, really, we would be selecting or requesting board approval of the construction manager at risk delivery method. Board approval of the request for qualifications is not a requirement, and really the memorandum, to walk through the process of who would be included on the committee, the North Dakota Century Code requirements. That's really just information for you as the board to know who is required to be on that committee, and it's a pretty rigorous process for the CMAR. That's much more rigorous than proposals in other cases. In other cases, you would not have to have a registered architect, registered engineer, and a licensed contractor on the selection committee. And so that's, the CMAR delivery method in North Dakota requires, those to have a representative of each of those, each of those various works to be included in the process.
So I guess the reason I'm asking the question is because it says within that memo there, the governing body, which is the school board, shall form the selection committee. So to me, that means we should have to approve forming the committee, which I would assume would be saying who the members are.
Yeah, that in discussing with Mr. Arnold, he did not say, or in our discussions, there was not discussion of board approval required for the selection committee. I know if Mr. Beam, if you know that the individuals that Mr. Arnold has selected, or maybe I can.
Mr. Beam, can you help us?
You know, we've had conversations with Mr. Arnold about the selection committee. I believe that he is looking at JLG Architects as the architect. I think that we reached out to a local contractor, I think Structures Incorporated, as a contractor. And I think we were looking at A2S as an engineer. I think it was Mr. Clevin.
So I know Mr. Arnold has had, thank you, Mr. Beam. I know, Mr. Arnold's had conversations with JLG and with, various firms. But my understanding was that the board did not need to approve those specific individuals or firms to be on this committee.
I think we better verify and make sure. I mean, when something tells me that shall form, the governing body shall form, that seems to me we have to take affirmative action. It may not have to be tonight. It may be at a future meeting before this committee actually has to function, but I'd verify that to make sure, just so we dot our I's and cross our T's.
I would agree. I would suggest we approve the CMR delivery process. And if they do need specific approval from us, though, I don't want a special meeting on December 23rd. It'll have to wait till January for approval. Hopefully that'll work Chris's time frame. So, other questions or comments from the board? If not, the administrative recommendation is to approve the CMR delivery process for the CIA building. We have a motion by Doug. Do we have a second? Second by Jeff. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And now we move on to what Cynthia and I always think is the most exciting part of the meetings, is policy review. And as you can tell, it's pages 45 through 114, so we had a lot. Mr. Douth, Dr. Shab, and I had a lot of work to do at the beginning of December. So Cynthia, I'll let you take it over.
Some of these are fairly straightforward. Some of them were more complicated. So we're completing the first reading of the policies as written or amended. The first, I think we'll take these in a pretty good size chunk. We're looking at 12 first readings, and it is a first reading, so then, we could always look at it again, or we will be looking at it again. So I'll do these in a block, all right? I'm making a motion to approve the restraint or seclusion policy as amended. The ABAB policy, school year and calendar. ABBDA, political activities as written. That's a new recommended policy. ABBE, displays of religious objects or documents. The use of animals in school districts and in curricular programs. We had looked at that last spring and brought it back again. ACBC. By we, I'm saying the committee actually had looked at these. ACBD, school medication program. A new recommended policy. ACBE, naloxone administration. ACBG, do not resuscitate, do not intubate. This was a new policy, if you look at Cindy's notes in our packet, that was requested in the past by the school nurses. It wasn't one that the North Dakota School Boards Association had available, so it was developed and edited by the district's legal counsel. ACEC, vandalism, new supplementary policy. DE, staff code of conduct, new recommended policy template. Teacher discharge for cause, this is a new recommended policy. And early entrance requirements, again, a new recommended policy template. Replacing policy 5100. I didn't read all those that policies are replacing. So I'd make a motion to approve those as first reading.
Do we have a second? We have a second by Chris. Questions, clarifying questions, comments about any of those policies that were outlined?
I'm going to ask a question because it came to me very late and I didn't have a chance to do anything with it, but I'll be sending a question about the calendar, whether February is a good date. Someone requested an earlier deadline for setting the calendar, and I don't know why we would need anything earlier than February, but apparently Fargo is doing it earlier, so I can just check on, I'll send that query out, just so you know I've had some comments about it.
Other clarifying questions or comments? Seeing none, the motion is to approve those policies for their first reading, which means they will come back in not 2 weeks, I guess, the next meeting. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Dr. Shab.
So the next one is second reading and adoption of the ACEA bullying policy as amended. We had this one go back to the North Dakota School Boards Association. We had completed this first reading in October of 2021. It was pulled and sent back to the committee due to the questions that I had received, and I felt like when we reviewed it, the North Dakota School Boards Association, I think we all believe, responded to the questions, and no additional changes have been made to the policy since its first reading. I'd make a motion to approve that as a second reading.
Do we have a second for that? Second by Doug. Further questions or comments about the bullying policy? I think one of the questions that had come up last time was talking about victim and perpetrator, and the School Boards Association says that it's written in state law, and that's why they are using those terms, because that's still part of state law, and that's why they didn't recommend changing those terms. Any other questions? Seeing none, do we have a motion and a second on this one? We did, okay, sorry. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Dr. Shab.
I can see why we are on the policy committee, because we're like talking about these policies, like, it's good. All right, the next motion is to rescind policies. These are all of our former policies that now we would have new policies for, and that is 4250, employees' right to know, 4400, alcohol and drug abuse, 5331, technology use, 5370, alcohol and other drug use abuse, 5661, non-discrimination on the basis of disability, and 6166, use of technology. All these have been replaced by other policies. I'd make a motion to rescind those.
Do we have a second? Second by Jeff. Further questions or comments? Seeing none, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Let's move on to item 7E, which is consideration of public forum date change on electronic page 115. Dr. Brenner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At your school board meeting on July 12, 2021, which was our organizational meeting, you approved the regular school board meeting dates along with the public forum to be scheduled on January 24th, 2022 at South Middle School. Because we're not quite through with the work session, and it looks like we'll extend that to January 10th, I would recommend that we move our public forum to March 28th. There's no risk. We're still within the academic year that we need to hold this public forum. As a matter of fact, based on all the school board meetings that we've had and public participation in the way that's occurred, we've really had several public forums. But having said that, we want to make sure we work through our work sessions so we can frame the conversations around focus groups and invite the public to participate, much like we've done in the past without going too deep into the weeds. Have that opening presentation, and then break our community out into groups and have them talk about the topics that we would like them to discuss and provide feedback for us. So the recommendation is to please move the public forum from January 28th to March 24th to the 28th.
Clarifying questions or comments? If not, can I get a motion in a second? Oh, go ahead, sorry.
I
Cynthia.
actually think March is better because I think it's always been so unpredictable. I will say that is the week of the writers' conference. That's the one thing I look forward to at UND. I mean, not the only thing, but one of the things I look forward to at UND. So good to know ahead of time.
Any further clarifying questions or comments? If not, do we have a motion? Motion.
moved.
Motion by Mr. Douthit. Do we have a second? Second by Cynthia. I'm sorry, second by Jackie. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Let's move on to item 8A, announcements. Dr. Brenner?
No announcements.
Catherine? No? Melissa? Got anything for us? Okay. Let's move on. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was able to partake in a youth mental health training. And I mean, I have quite a bit of training in my background for mental health and things, but it was still really a cool thing that's offered. So I'll probably maybe pass it on to Cindy or someone and maybe include something like that in Friday Focus, because I think it would be really beneficial for board members to take something like that.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Okay. Any board requests for future consideration? Doug?
I guess, and this is not maybe something for future consideration, but I'd like to get, as soon as the document that we completed today, that's got all that parts in it, can we get that right away instead of right before the next meeting? So that way we can have more consideration on our own.
Yeah, Dr. Lewis and I had already talked about getting that out, so you'll have one little Christmas present coming in your mail before Christmas. Go ahead.
So one of the other comments that I would like, since we're on that same thing, is I still feel strongly about the current, I know that you think it's all done and it's in stone, but I don't think that the why was addressed about the curriculum piece. And so if executive cabinet could just kind of think about that. And then also Amber's last comment with that one that was on the holding table or whatever, I would agree that we might need to look at that too, but I don't have my note handy. If you need to know that exactly. Difficulty in attracting and retaining adequate staff rather than just the way it was worded. So curriculum needs and difficulty in attracting. If the cabinet could just consider that.
Thank you. I believe the cabinet is not chiseling into granite until over the Christmas break, so they haven't finished that part yet. So, any other future considerations? 8C, Mr. Douthit, how did we do with our norms?
We did very well. In fact, we could add a number 8, ending on or before time. We ended 15 minutes early.
Well, I haven't adjourned us yet, and now that I've got the floor, no. We are adjourned. You guys have happy holidays, and we will see you next year.